I'm not ashamed to own my Lord, nor to defend his cause. Maintain the honors of his word, the glory of his cross.
All right, we're in Revelation chapter 9. And we finished last week, of course, with chapter 8. We are in the vision of the trumpets. We discussed the visions of the first 4 trumpets last week. And if you recall at the end of that chapter, so going back to Revelation chapter 8, if you recall at the end of that chapter, if I can get my iPad to go there, we read at verse 13, "Then I looked and heard an eagle crying with a loud voice as it flew directly overhead, 'Woe, woe, woe to those who dwell on the earth! At the blast of the other trumpets, the 3 angels are about to blow.'" And so that leads us into chapter 9. Remember, chapters and verses are added later by men, and so the people, the 7 churches who are reading this, don't have chapter 9. They don't have verse 1. They're reading it as a letter. And so when we read verse 13, that goes right in to chapter 9. But because it's easier for us to read in smaller chunks rather than in one large chunk, this vision is separated. And so let's remember that we're still discussing the same vision. It's not anything different. So let's read Revelation chapter 9. We're going to read the first 12 verses. And that's really all we're going to be covering today, is the first 12 verses of this chapter. And we'll save the rest to next week. Lord willing, let's read, if I can get, my battery seems to have died on that. So, Revelation chapter 9, beginning at verse 1, we'll start with Jeff. Go to glory. We'll do one slide each.
"And the 5th angel blew his trumpet, and I saw a star fallen from heaven to earth. He was given the key to the shaft of the bottomless pit. He opened the shaft of the bottomless pit, and from the shaft rose smoke like the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened with the smoke from the shaft."
Then from the smoke came locusts and rumors. They were given power like the power of scorpions and they were told not to harm the grass of the earth, or any green plant, or any tree, but only those people who do not have the seal of God on their foreheads.
They were allowed to torment them for 5 months, but not give them their torment was like the torment of scorpion when it stings someone. And in those days, people will seek death and will not find it. They will long to die, but death will flee from them.
In the purity, the locusts were like the horses we have of iron. On their heads were what looked like crowns of gold. Their faces were like human faces. Their hair like women's hair. Their teeth like male's teeth.
They had breastplates, like breastplates of iron, and the noise of their wings was like the noise of many carriers with horses rushing into them. They have tails and stings like scorpions, with their power to hurt people. 5 mouths is in their tails.
They have as eagle over the angel of the bottomless pit. His name is Hebrew, is adopted, and in Greek he is called Adonai. The first war has passed, behold, 2 wars are still to come.
Okay, so we have 2 more angels sounding their trumpets in these 12 verses. We need to be careful what type of language is done using. Figurative language, symbolic language. Is literally what we're seeing here, therefore, going to happen just like we see it, just like we read of it? No. There's not going to be a star falling from heaven. We think that, of course, would be absolutely, that would destroy our earth. A star fell from heaven. A literal star. Because we know our sun, which is a star in actuality, is so much larger than our earth. But in our sky, what do stars look like? Just little points of light. And sometimes we call it a shooting star. It's not a shooting star. It's a meteor, an asteroid. But we call them shooting stars because they're points of light that flash across our sky. But when we think of a star falling from heaven, of course, yes, that would be something major. But that's all we're talking about. We're talking about major events. We're talking about things that people will sit up and take notice about. Remember, these are warnings. Trumpets are warnings about things that God was going to judge this earth with. And so, no, these are not literal events, but this is signifying God's judgment. This is a warning of God's judgment. And God's judgment would be real. This is not fake judgment. God would judge this earth in many ways. We often think of God's final judgment with punishment in hell or reward in heaven. That's still judgment as well. But God judges this earth in many ways. What ways does God judge this earth, even today? Through what? Even though we may not recognize it. How does God judge the people of this earth? Does he do it through famine? Possibly.
Through the Word.
Well, he absolutely through the Word. That is a good answer, Gordon. Absolutely through the Word. He judges us. That's how we are going to be judged in the end, but he judges us. He compares our lives to that of the Word. But does he judge people physically today? Perhaps. We don't know how God judges this earth. We take a look, and of course, preachers online or on TV will say, well, this hurricane was a judgment of God because of that. They don't know that. Perhaps it was, but perhaps it wasn't. Perhaps it's just a natural disaster that happens because natural disasters happen on this earth. People can blame anything they want on God and say anything, whether it's good or bad, well, that's because of God. Usually we think, oh, that's good things. Well, that's because of God. Well, God blesses us. We can't deny that God does act in this world. And we should not think that God never acts in this world. But we must not go the other extreme and say that everything that happens is because God did it. And so, yes, God judges this earth. He does it in many ways we cannot see all the time and determine with specificity that something is a judgment of God. But in that time, who was going to be judged? Who was going to be judged? The people that we're going to find that don't have the mark the mark on their forehead that we read of earlier. We'll get to that in a minute. But Rome is going to be judged. We're starting to get into, and especially when we get to later in this chapter, we find the beast. The beast is going to be Rome. Rome is going to be judged. The devil is going to be judged. This world is going to be judged by God. And God did this in many ways. But let's get back to verse 1 and get our first question. What did John see when the fifth trumpet sounded?
Star from heaven which had fallen on the earth to the earth. The key of the bottomless pit was given to them.
Alright, so we see this star fallen from heaven. And again, yes, and he was given the key to the bottomless pit. Now many people are asking, who is this star? Is it directly told to us? No, we don't. We don't know. Later on, people try to connect the angel of the bottomless pit with this star. Although It doesn't say that. There are two different things happening. We have one person given the key to the bottomless pit, and then we have the angel of the bottomless pit. People try to connect them and say, well, those are the same angel. That's not necessarily true. It could be true, but it's not necessarily true. And therefore, let's not assume that. What most commentators are going to say, who do you believe most commentators are going to say the star falling from heaven is? Anyone take a guess? When you connect it with the angel later?
I would say Satan.
Now you're going to say Satan. Now you're going to say it's the devil.
Yeah.
That's given the key to the bottomless pit. I don't agree with that, but most commentators are going to say that. Let's go back, though, to Isaiah. I'm going to read for time's sake, because it's a longer reading. So back to Isaiah chapter 14. The reason why people believe that is because they believe that Isaiah describes someone who is the devil. And they're going to connect what we read in Isaiah with what we read in Revelation. And we're going to discuss for a second why that really is not the case. Let's go to Isaiah chapter 14. I'm going to read verses 12 to 21. Isaiah 14, verses 12 to 21. We're going to get most of the rest of the chapter as well. So how you are fallen from heaven, O day star, son of dawn, how you are cut down to the ground. Who laid the nations low? Who said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven above the stars of God? I will set my throne on high. I will sit on the mount of the assembly in the far reaches of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. But you are brought down to Sheol, to the far reaches of the pit. Those who see you will stare at you and ponder over you. Is this the man who made the earth tremble, who shook kingdoms, who made the world like the desert and overthrew its cities, who did not let his prisoners go home? All the kings of the nation lie in glory, each in his own tomb. But you are cast away from your grave like a loathed branch, clothed with the slain, those pierced by the sword, who go down to the stones of the pit, like a dead body trampled underfoot. You will not be joined with them in burial, because you have destroyed your land, you have slain your people. May the offspring of evildoers never more be named. Prepare slaughter of his sons because of the guilt of their fathers, lest they rise and possess the earth and fill the face of the world with cities. Now many people say, well, sounds like the devil, at least in those first few verses. Day star, the son of dawn. You ascend to heaven above the stars. You set your throne on high. You ascend to the heights of the clouds, but you are brought down. You're cast out of heaven. And you want to know that's where most of the origin stories of the devil come from this chapter and other books that are written based on this. But it is important when we read Scripture to remember what? Who is being talked to and the context. Let's go back to the beginning of the chapter. Beginning of the chapter, let's read verses 1 to 3, and then we'll skip down to verses 22 and 23. For the Lord will have compassion on Jacob, and will again choose Israel, and will set them in their own land. And sojourners will join them, and will attach themselves to the house of Jacob. And the peoples will take them and bring them to their place. And the house of Israel will possess them in the Lord's land as male and female slaves. They will take captive those who were their captors, and rule over those who oppress them. When the Lord has given you rest from your pain and turmoil and the hand service of which you were made to serve, you will take up this taunt against the king of Babylon. Skip down to verse 22, which is where we ended our reading. I will rise up against them, declares the Lord of hosts, and will cut off Babylon from Babylon, name and remnant, descendants of posterity, declares the Lord. And I will make it a possession of the hedgehog and pools of water, and I will make it sweet. Let's try that again. And I will sweep it with the broom of destruction, declares the Lord. Now, yes, there is some figurative language being used in this chapter. Who is being talked about?
King Babylon.
king of Babylon is being talked about. The devil is not being talked about in this chapter. And so to come along and connect this chapter and the description with the devil and then take it to Revelation chapter 9, we're taking a misinterpreted scripture and misinterpreting it to another scripture, which is doubly bad. And so, yeah, you're going to read Ezekiel of a man named Lucifer. Again, that's the king of Tyre. That's not the devil. And so, no, Lucifer is not the devil. No, this is not the devil either. And so, we need to remember when we go to the Old Testament, figurative language represents certain things. And so, the king of Babylon, what do we know about the king of Babylon? At least the one that we read of in Scripture, the most famous one. What did he do? Would he fit this description found in Isaiah? Yes.
Well, he took the Jews and they brought them captive to Babylon.
Sure.
And treated them too.
Sure. He was the one who fulfilled this prophecy. What might we say about his character from what we read of in the book of Daniel? Well, was he a humble man? No, general. Maybe in the end, when after God has judged him and punished him for 7 years, he may have had a little bit more humility. He was an arrogant man. He was a very powerful man. And he ruled, his kingdom was a vast kingdom. But if you recall, in one of the chapters in Daniel, he was saying, look at all of the kingdoms that I have. He raised himself up to be like God. He thought he had done all of these things when in fact God had given these things into his hand. And so he didn't give God the glory, but he puffed himself up. And was he cast down? Yes, he was. Not only was he judged and forced to vacate the throne, God drove him to madness, but his kingdom did not stand. Babylon itself was taken in one night by the Medes and the Persians, according to the book of Daniel. Bill, did you have something?
Yeah, well, the only one really that has the keys to the bottomless pit, Revelations 1 and 18, tells us that Christ has the keys of Hades and of death.
Mm-hmm. And we'll get to later on in Revelation 20, which we're about to go.
Really?
Yeah.
We don't know who.
That's my point.
Yeah.
That's the point I'm trying to make, is that to come along and say, because what Isaiah talks about the devil being a star, and then the devil wasn't called a star in this was someone else. But if you misinterpret Isaiah and then come along and apply that to Revelation, you can come along and say, the devil has the key to the bottomless pit. We never read of, in this book, the devil possessing the key to the bottomless pit. Now, he is most likely the angel of the bottomless pit that we read of later on in chapter 9. He is most likely that angel. But that doesn't mean that he had the key to the bottomless pit. The devil didn't have full power. The devil we think of as having all power. The devil doesn't have all power. God is still in control. God can chain the devil, can control the devil, can defeat the devil. But as Bill was saying, the devil doesn't have the key to the bottomless pit in this book. And in fact, I believe that it's the angel that blew the trumpet, or another angel at least, that's the star here. It doesn't have to be the angel that blew the trumpet, but another angel. It is not the devil, though. In Revelation chapter 20, verse 1, I think we're coming over to Lisa.
Then I saw a man coming down from heaven, holding in his hand the key to the bottomless pit and a great key.
Again, so we have in the book, when we get to the climax of this book, the key to the bottomless pit. We're not going to discuss this chapter and the the thousand year binding of the devil. But we'll discuss that when we get there. But what I'm saying here is the devil is not the one holding the key in this chapter. He's going to be the one that is bound in this chapter. The great dragon is going to be bound and cast into the bottomless pit. So he's not the one who has the key. And so if he's not the one who has the key in chapter 20, let's not come and assume he has the key in chapter 9. Because that's just, again, an assumption. Any comments before we move on? Cal?
He was given certain powers to do certain things. He's allowed to tempt us and allowed to do so many things. But why would he have the key to the bottomless pit? If you think about it, people in jail, they're jailed up and why would they have the key to get in and out?
Yeah.
Those in authority would have it.
Yeah.
So,
That's a good point. I like the analogy, yeah. The devil's going to be cast in jail. He doesn't have the key. He's not the jailer in the sense of the one who is the ultimate jailer. He's going to be cast there. And so, yes, we have this fifth trumpet sounding, and the star fell from heaven. And the angel with the bottomless pit comes and has this key. Now, that leads us to our second question. The smoke of the pit did what? Going back to Revelation chapter 9. The smoke of the pit did what? In verse 2.
like the smoke of a great furnace.
Darken the sky.
Darken the sky. Again, this language of judgments. Sun darkened, the moon turned to blood. Well, the sun and the air were darkened with the smoke of the shaft. So in other words, when we see smoke coming from, when we see a large fire, like a large fire, it can darken the sky if it's a huge fire. Like if in the old days when a city could be set on fire, it darkened the sky. If you saw the pictures of 9/11 from the ground, the people on the ground, when those buildings fell, the sky went black with smoke and everything, and the rubble from the building. That's the sort of picture we're seeing here. Again, picture of judgment, not literal, figurative picture of judgment.
Verse 3, the smoke also sort of releases locusts, or the locusts come out of it.
That's our next question. So we'll get there. Who were the locusts and who were they not given power to hurt? Yeah. So we got this smoke, this great furnace. So the angel with the key to the bottomless pit opened the pit, and out of the pit came woes. Remember, woes are coming. There are woes to come. And so the key was opened, smoke came out, and locusts came out of the smoke. And so, who were the locusts not given power to hurt? They were not given power to hurt those who did not have the seal of God on their forehead. Who were those people? Who were the people who weren't sealed?
Question says, who were the locusts not given power to hurt?
Yeah.
Which would be the people with the seals.
With the seals, yeah. They were not given power to hurt the people with the seals on their forehead. Who were those people?
Children of God.
Children of God. Remember, all the way back in chapter 7, that the children of God were sealed, were identified, protected, and approved of. They had the seal. And so, anyone who was not sealed was not a follower of God. The locusts then could hurt those people. But what were they not allowed to do? Kill them. This is not the locusts in this chapter. The locusts in this chapter, the judgment the warning of judgment here. The locusts were not given the power to kill those people. How long were they tormented?
5 months.
5 months. So remember, numbers don't mean numbers here. This is not a literal 5 months. What it's saying is it's a short period of time. It's not a complete period of time. Not the number 7, where we have completely for an extended period of time. Not the number 10, half of 10. Half of 10. If 10 is complete, 5 being half of 10 is an incomplete period of time. A shorter period of time. So this is not the locusts who are like scorpions. We're not going to be tormenting forever. And so that's important that we remember that. Jeff?
Are you saying figuratively then the grass, the green thing, or the tree represents God's people? They're being told not to hurt the grass of the earth, the green thing, or any tree, but only those men who do not have the seal of God in the forehead.
I guess I was more focusing those who didn't have the seal on their forehead.
No, I'm just going by the question.
Yeah. I guess that may be what this is representing here. I guess I hadn't really thought about that. I was just saying that those who do not have the seal of God on their forehead were the ones who
But
were.
also they were not to harm.
Yeah.
For some reason the grass of the earth.
This was more, I guess, a judgment on the people then. Like I started, not a judgment on the earth. Because remember, we read before that there would be pestilence, there would be famine and other things. And this, I guess, maybe what John is saying here is this is not a judgment on the earth itself. That this judgment was going to be on the people themselves, and they're going to be pleading for death and not be able to find it. And so maybe that, I guess you could come along and say, well, maybe the plants and those are the Christians, but that's not necessarily true. And you can come along and just say, well, they were tormenting the people. They were not tormenting. This was a direct torment rather than indirect. James, did you have something to say?
Yeah, you covered it all. It was, I think here it is saying that there won't be like a famine or anything because food will still be available. You know, there won't be any shortage of the necessary thing because the plants will still be there, the trees will still be there, but the people will still suffer.
Yes, and there was going to be war that's coming later on in this chapter. We're going to find a 200 million man army. So this is I guess a different type of judgment, a different type of punishment, but directly on the people from these locusts. Again, this is not physical locusts. But what do locusts do, by the way? We read of locusts, we just assume we know. What are locusts?
Crops and stuff.
Pardon me?
Destroy crops.
They destroy crops.
Angry grasshoppers.
Yes, I watched Planet Earth, the documentary, the BBC documentary, and they were showing locusts coming in, and the one African desert gets grass every so often. It's very rare because it's usually desert. And when the grass comes, the locusts just, like as far as locusts hibernate, and they don't, or at least they aren't always out in the open. And so when the grass comes, then the locusts come. And the locusts, you don't just get one locust. You have a swarm. And I mean a huge swarm of locusts. And yes, that's exactly right. They showed this swarm, and it was huge, and it destroys everything. And getting back to Jeff's point, locusts usually eat the grass and the trees, but in this case, they're not doing that. This is a more direct judgment. Because usually, you think of locusts, they're going to eat the grass. You're going to eat everything. And it's just going to be, and when they were done in that documentary, it was just barren. It was gone. Everything was gone. Not in this case. This is a direct judgment on people. And it was going to be for 5 months. And the reason why we know these aren't direct, like these aren't real locusts, this is just a figure of speech, because I asked you to describe the locusts. Alright, so first thing we have is they were like horses prepared for battle. The Lord said they had breastplates of iron. What else?
It's definitely not a.
No, it's not.
I mean, look at some use with the breastplate of iron.
But yeah, like I started, but Yes, Cal.
Please refresh my memory. Who are the ones with not the seals on their forehead?
Those weren't Christians. The people without the seals were not Christians.
But why would they say to save them?
Pardon me?
Not to play them.
The Christians weren't the ones being judged here. The judgments that we're reading here, we read of persecution, we read of things that would affect Christians in the visions of the seven seals. This specific judgment, if you recall, the saints under the altar were pleading with God for justice. And God said, wait, justice is coming, it's not yet. Well, the trumpets are a warning of judgment. Judgment is not going to come on Christians. They're not the ones that are in the wrong here. They aren't the ones not following God. And so the judgment here is judgment of God. This is not judgment of Rome. This is not the judgment of the devil. This is not affliction caused by the devil. This is warning of judgment of God. And so the judgment of God in this chapter is coming on people who are not Christians. And so these locusts here, again, were described as war horses, golden crowns, faces as of men, hair as of women, teeth as of lions, breastplate of iron, wings that made the sound of many chariots, stingers in their tail like that of scorpions. Very powerful. What's being described here? Judgment is God's not sending weak things to judge. It's strong. Like I said, we would think if we saw men dressed like this, an army dressed like this, we'd be afraid. This is how people dressed for war at that time. And so the judgment of God was going to be, in this case, or at least the warning of judgment. This is a warning of judgment. If we actually saw this, we'd sit up and take notice. If this was an actual event, we'd sit up and take notice. We'd say, this is not normal. This is not normal. And so these were the locusts. These were the judgments. And our last question that we'll deal with this morning is, who was the king of the locusts? Or who was the ruler of the locusts? He was given two names. Apollyon, that's the Greek name. Abaddon, which is the Hebrew name. Now, those names mean destruction or destroyer. And so, who would the ruler of the locusts likely be? Well, people say, well, maybe this is the devil. Perhaps that is true. Perhaps that is not, though. The locusts here, like remember again, this is more, remember, judgment of God. And so, maybe it's not. But the ruler of the locusts is Abaddon. Apollyon, meaning great destruction and destroyer. There was, remember, this was the ruler of the bottomless pit here as well. So, like I started, he's the angel of the bottomless pit. And that's why you'll say, well, this was the devil. God uses different means to judge. And so, those who did not have the seal of God in their foreheads, they would not be hurt. So they did not hurt the green grass. They tormented 5 months all men who did not have the seal of God in their forehead. And these people would be wanting death and not be able to find it. That's not very nice to think about. Just wanting death, pleading for death. That's how much pain is being inflicted here. And so we have these locusts. That was the first woe. That was only the fifth. Remember, there were 2 woes still to come. We have 7 trumpets. We've read of 5. God, warning of God's judgment that is to come. And so, next week, the Lord willing, we will take up with the 6th angel. and what is going to happen when the sixth angel sounds his trumpet, and then that will lead us to the end of chapter 9.
I'm not ashamed to hold my Lord, nor to defend his cause. Maintain the honors of his word, the